Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by co-host Matt Carter, and today we are going to talk a little bit about the over-under totals that Vegas has set for NC State football entering the 2021 season. If we're sounding a little bit different, you normally listen to us on podcast form. You don't watch us on YouTube. We are in a little bit different environment here. We're both in the office of Komen headquarters, and we're in separate rooms so that we're not hearing each other's echoes. So if there's any sound differences or anything, it's because I don't have my normal microphone. But bear with us here because we're going to have an interesting conversation today. And if you don't already, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always watch us on our YouTube channel, where you should subscribe to our YouTube channel and give this video a thumbs up. So as I mentioned, Matt, we're going to talk a little bit about Las Vegas over-under totals for NC State. I wrote about this about 2 weeks ago. I have a story up on the wolfpacker.com. Go check it out if you'd like. And while you're there, use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium content, news, and analysis. This is actually a free story, so you can look at this without the code. But promise me this, if you're going to read the story, go use that code, promo code PACK60 at thewolfpacker.com. The story is called Over Under, Examining NC State Wolfpack Football Totals in 2021. We're going to talk about those totals I discussed a little bit in that article. Now, I didn't give my picks or predictions of which side I would be on. I just kind of analyzed them in the article, and we'll have a little bit fun discussion today about some of those various totals. The odds we're getting are from sportsbettingdime.com. When we talk about the win total over under, I'll also give you another number from vegasinsider.com. But Matt, let's start off with the win total conversation, because I think that'll be probably the most interesting in terms of, this over under win total that NC State is getting in Vegas. A lot of people are on the over, and I'm sure NC State fans would love to take that over bet if that's what they like to do. You never want to pick the under, on your team. So the over-under total that sportsbettingdime.com gives NC State is 6.5. Now, if you want the specific odds for that, vegasinsider.com actually has the over-under win total for NC State at 6. If you want to bet the over, that gives you minus 139 odds, which means you'd have to bet $139 to profit $100 on that over bet. If you wanted to take the under, Vegas is giving you, or according to vegasinsider.com, they're giving you plus 110 odds to take the under on 6 wins. So if NC State only wins 5 games or fewer this fall, then a $100 bet would profit $110. So that tells you that Vegas is a little bit more confident that the over is going to hit with that specific number. If you take a 6.5 number, you'd probably get better odds on the over. But Matt, let's talk about this because, expectations are high for the Wolfpack entering this fall. 19 returning starters coming off an 8-4 season. You look at the past 4 years under Dave Doeren. Of course, there was that one disappointing 4-8 campaign in 2019, but 3 of the past 4 seasons, NC State has won at least 8 games, if not more. And at first glance, this total seems a little low for the Wolfpack. But if you look at the schedule and you look at some of the analytics involved at the different projections for NC State football this year, just based on the increased difficulty of the schedule, the computers are coming back with about 6.5 as kind of the projected range. So I don't think the number is off, but there might be an edge you could take. Matt, what's your initial impression of that 6.5 over under total? Do you think that's correct, or do you think it should be something else?
Well, I'll expand it further when you talk about Dave Doeren's history. This is his 9th season at NC State. 6 out of 8 years, he has at least 7 wins. So, but the over and under 6.5 for a guy who 75% of his tenure has been over. And talent-wise, this team is far more in line with the 6 teams that went over than the 2 teams that went under. Remember, that first team that went under was a team that he inherited that had a lot of talent issues. The other team that went under was a team that had a catastrophic amount of of injuries that year. So um, it would seem to be on the low side. I get where Vegas is coming from the scheduling standpoint. You and I have talked ad nauseum about this. Um, it's a challenging schedule just because when you look at the ACC games and the one out of conference game that should be a toss up, every single one of them is pretty much on the road. When you look at the most challenging games, you see two out of the three, if you're not the top two. The two top 10 teams on your schedule, based on the coaches poll, are both coming to Carter Finley Stadium. So you have what I would consider four games that should be easy wins. At Carter Finley Stadium, you got one in, I think it's Louisville. You got to wait and see what Louisville is before you make that judgment call. And then you got your two toughest games on paper at home. So, and basically that leaves your next five toughest games on the road. And I think that's probably what Vegas is doing, with you messing with the analytics and the FPI, the Football Power Index from ESPN. If a couple of those games were switched to Carter Finley Stadium, you would probably see that over and under go up a game or two. That said, I lean towards taking the over just because of Dave Doran's historical performance at NC State. They average over 7 wins per game, I believe, in the tenure at NC State, or right at 7 wins per game. So, and that includes 2 seasons that, you can't blame him for year one because that's what he inherited. And anybody that gets mad about 2019 without acknowledging the catastrophic slate of injuries that hit the team across the board, not just one position group. You're talking pretty much across the board, combined with some issues of quarterback. That would have been tough for any team not named Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, or Ohio State to withstand. So I think his history is on the side of taking the over on that bet.
I'm with you in that I lean towards the over here. I mean, I think both of us share the same season win-loss prediction. I think we're both at 8-4. Of course, we'll make our official picks before the season starts on September 2nd. I'm sure in the week leading up to the opener against South Florida on that Thursday night at Carter Finley Stadium. But you mentioned FPI, ESPN's Football Power Index, which is probably the most cited computer analytics model of, just preseason punching out numbers. Here's how many projected wins a team is looking at. And FPI puts NC State right at 6.5 wins. So Vegas seems to agree with FPI, and I'm sure a lot of the computer models are probably pretty similar in the sense when they come up with these odds.
I'm sure there's some kind of home field bump from the FPI's perspective when they look at those winning percentages. And I wonder how much of that home field bump would switch the odds in NC State's favor if the game was flipped.
Yes, I think FPI's, they give percentage chances to win each game. So NC State's best percentage chance to win this season is going to be the September 18th contest in Carter Finley Stadium against Furman. FPI gives NC State a 96.3% chance to win. I think it's about an 8 to 10% bump based on who the home team is. For example, the Florida State game, that's on the road. FPI gives NC State a chance, 42.4% chance of winning in Tallahassee, even though Florida State is ranked 44th in the nation according to FPI. NC State is ranked 41st. So they're looked at as two pretty comparable teams, but the Seminoles get the bump there because they're at home. There was another one, I think it was the Louisville game, where Louisville was regarded pretty similarly. The Cardinals are ranked 43rd, just 2 spots back of NC State in the FPI rankings. but FPI gives NC State a 59.4% chance to win at home against Louisville. So anywhere from about 8 to 10% chance of, swing, probably in total about 20%, because presumably if you played this game on a neutral field, it would be a 50-50 coin flip. And really, when it comes down to it, it probably is more of a 50-50 game. There might be a little bit too much of an emphasis on playing at home versus on the road, but we will see, because fans are presumably going to be back in the stands this fall, knock on wood, with the Delta variant and everything. But presumably there will be butts back in seats, and these stadiums will be a lot louder than they were last fall when we had at best limited attendance. But I think we seem to be in agreement here, Matt, that the over seems to be the play. Of course, you're not going to get as juicy odds, and I don't think the under is 100% out of question. I mean, especially if you're looking at that 6.5 number, I mean, you're looking at a team that the under could still hit, and NC State could still be bowl eligible. But I think there's at least 7 wins on the schedule, even though it is more difficult. We're in total agreement, Matt. There's 4 games that should be definite wins for NC State, Syracuse being the lone conference game. Then you look at Furman, you look at Louisiana Tech, and you look at South Florida. Those are all games that FPI gives NC State at least an 85% chance of victory. So you kind of start the season with 4 in your pocket, and then you look at the rest of that schedule, and out of those 8 remaining games, you're betting, can NC State go 3-5 in those games? Short of catastrophic injuries, I don't see how they don't go at least 3-5 in those games. Unless NC State just ends up getting the unluckiest schedule, and all of these toss-up games turn out to be the surprise teams in the ACC. But you look at
all be the surprise team, right?
Right, exactly. So I mean, you have to assume that a Louisville or a Florida State or a Wake Forest. I mean, these are teams that are kind of considered in the same group as NC State, and they may very well be, but I would probably take the bet that at least one of those teams is going to have a disappointing season this year when it's all said and done, and you're going to look back at that game as a game that NC State should win. I mean, the 3 games that NC State's certainly going to be the underdog in, short of any huge surprises. The home games against Clemson in Week 4, the home game against Carolina in the last week of the season over Thanksgiving, and then the road game against Miami in the middle of the year. And I think with this veteran group, I mean, you look at the difference between an NC State and a Miami last season. You look at Clemson entering this year on kind of a slightly down year. Of course, Clemson is, again, preseason number 2 in the latest coaches poll, but they've got a new freshman quarterback that did get a little bit of playing experience last year. Of course, he's highly touted, was the number 1 guy in the 2020 class, but he's still a young quarterback, and he's still going to have his first true road experience in the ACC at Carter Finley Stadium. And then Carolina's a rivalry game, so anything can happen in those. I'd like to think NC State gets at least one of those this year, and then they probably hold their weight with at least 500 record in those remaining 5 games. They go 2-3, 3-2 in those games. Either way, as long as they win one of those underdog games, they're going to hit that over. So anything else on that win total before we move on to some statistical over-unders, Matt?
No, I think it's really, I think you just hit it on the nail. You got to find a way. And this is not for Vegas. This is really to kind of break down the success of the NC State season. It's going to be, putting aside the over and under. Who cares about the betting angle of it? Just the basic analysis of NC State's season. How good can they be on the road? Point simple. Are they going to be like the baseball team of 2021 that were just absolute warriors on the road? They can take a page out of Elliot Avens' book when it comes to playing on the road, then they'll be just fine.
Well, if you are an over better on NC State, I think the one game you circle the most is that Week 2 matchup at Mississippi State. FPI gives NC State a 33.6% chance of winning in Starkville. I think those odds are a little bit low in my mind. I think Mississippi State is a team that not a lot of people know much about. They could end up being a disappointing team in the SEC. They're ranked 24th nationally according to FPI. I don't know if the Bulldogs are necessarily a top 25 team,
I
Matt.
seem to think that FPI is the most bullish. Excuse me, on Mississippi State. That if you look and span the other preseason prognosticators out there, they're not going to have Mississippi State in the same ballpark as FPI. I mean, FPI is strictly by the numbers. They put the numbers in there. And for whatever reason, Mississippi State looks good on paper on the numbers. But, that's going to change quite a bit, obviously. And for whatever reason, I could be wrong, but I'm fairly confident that ESPN's FPI is an outlier when it comes to Mississippi State.
Well,
they may be right, but they seem to be an outlier preseason-wise.
Assuming both those teams take care of business in week 1, I would guess, if I had to guess here, a month removed from that game happening, I would think Vegas probably sets the line, gives Mississippi State about 2 points. I would expect the Wolfpack to be 2-point underdogs going down to Starkville, maybe 3. It'll be pretty close to a pick'em, but I think the slight edge will be given to Mississippi State because they are the home team. I'm sure a lot of Vegas bettors will be on NC State in that game because on paper, I think NC State's just the better team. But we'll see how much that home field advantage ends up playing a factor because, look, if there's going to be stands in the fans this year, it's going to be a full house down in Mississippi, Starkville, Mississippi. So it is going to be an energetic environment, if you will, and a lot of cowbell noise, Matt. But anyways, let's move on to the statistical over-unders that sportsbettingdime.com provided us. Let's look at Devin Leary's numbers. They give out 2 numbers for over-under here, passing yards and passing touchdowns. The over-under for passing yards is 3,177.5, and the over-under for passing touchdowns is 24.5. So, the biggest question with these numbers is, first of all, is Devin Leary going to be able to stay healthy and play all 12 games this regular season? If you're an over-better, you pretty much have to bank on the fact that Leary's going to be able to play at least 10 or 11 of those games. I mean, you could maybe afford one game where he sits out, or maybe he misses the end of, a blowout game against a Furman or something like that. But, these are pretty bullish numbers on a guy that has never played the entirety of a season as a starting quarterback yet. Now, granted, he hasn't had much of an opportunity. He only went into last season as the team's starter, but he still only made 3 starts last season. So what's your initial impression of these numbers, Matt? Do they seem high to you? And are you at all concerned about Leary's ability to stay healthy through those 12 games?
I'm not. Nah, I'm not. I mean, he's never had an injury before. And, if you look at through NC State through the years, quarterback position, not a position that traditionally they get the bumps and the bruises and the guys are sore and things of that nature. I remember Russell Wilson missed a game once. Other than Brandon Mitchell breaking his foot in the season opener, usually it would take something catastrophic, fluky, for a quarterback to miss a lot of times at NC State. Philip Rivers never missed a game. Ryan Finley never missed a game. Jacoby Brissett never missed a game. Mike Lennon didn't miss a game once he became a starter. So I don't worry about that. I think that's a high number. That's more, because I'm thinking more pushing 3,000 yards, and that's pretty highly over 3,000. What was it again? What was the number?
The number is 3,177.5. Now, let me give you a couple more, Matt, just for perspective. Now, I understand that last season was an abbreviated year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of teams had to miss some games. But if you look across the league last year in the ACC, there were 2 quarterbacks that eclipsed 3,000 passing yards all season. They were Sam Howell of North Carolina and Trevor Lawrence of Clemson. 2 And Trevor Lawrence was the first pick of the 2021 NFL draft. Sam Howell's probably going to be a top 10 guy in the NFL draft. Those are two A-plus type quality college quarterbacks. Not saying that Devin Leary couldn't get there, but he's not necessarily in that same breath yet. There's no hot take there. We're not comparing Devin Leary to Sam Howell at this point. However, if you break it down on a game-by-game basis, Leary would have to average 264.8 passing yards per game to match that over-under total, which is pretty comparable.
And that's not assuming a bowl game either, right? That's assuming a 12-game regular season.
All of these are for regular season. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I would probably still lean toward the under, but because I'm thinking more of about 250 yards per game average for Leary. I kind of have 3,000 yards, is kind of the number in my mind for him to reach. So that'll be a tall order. Let's not forget they got two pretty good running backs. They might hand the ball off to during the season, and we know that they've done traditionally when they get a nice size lead, I should say, especially in ACC games. Tends to slow it down a little bit in the second half and work on shortening up the game late, limiting, kind of. And then it's smart football. I know it might aggravate some fans who the basketball equivalent would be, right? You had a 12, 14-point lead with 3 minutes to go, and you start sitting on the ball with about 3 minutes to go. Well, and then it drives fans crazy because, they stop being aggressive and the other team comes back. Mathematically and statistically, it is the smartest thing to do. Point blank, simple. That's why you see Coach K do it. He'll do it with like 5 minutes left in the game. I know it's not fun and it's et cetera, but mathematically, it's the smart thing to do. In baseball, it's smart to pull your starting pitcher, even if he's rolling through 6 innings. If you have 3 great relievers and you got a 3-run lead, you go ahead and shorten the game up, and you bring in your dominant relievers one after one after one. You only have to get 3 outs. So you see that too in football, where you kind of work the play clock. You snap it late. You make sure you have plays within the lines so that nobody's going out of bounds and the clock is rolling, and it shortens the games up. And that's something that Dave Doran has done in the past, I feel like. So, there are going to be some games where I think NC State has that opportunity this year. So I think the over-under is a tad bit aggressive for my taste.
When you were going into your spiel about, defending smart play in the second half, Matt, and I'm totally in agreement with you, by the way. You run the ball when you have a lead. I mean, come on.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
This is why college football coaches make the money that they do, and us online aren't college football coaches. But I needed that sound of, you play to win the game. Hello. Yeah. But I broke down the numbers just because Leary's production last year was kind of hard to equate into what it would look like into a 12-game regular season in 2021, because he made those 3 starts, but of course he was injured in his 3rd start in the 3rd quarter, so he missed the 4th quarter of that game. He also played in the second half of the Virginia Tech game in week 2.
I like to say he played about 3 full games if you add it up, I think.
About 3 full games. He played 13 quarters, basically, 13 full quarters. And again, when I broke it down, the over-under totals, Leary would have to get at least 264.8 passing yards per game to get that over. He would also have to throw at least 2.0 touchdowns per game or more. If you look at his
to the touchdown one yet.
Well, if you look at his 13 quarters of action last fall, Matt, he paced an average of 273.8 yards per game, about 9 more yards than he needs to get that over in passing yards. He also averaged 2.5 touchdowns per game in that roughly 3-game stretch there. So, if he can translate the production that he had in 13 quarters last year into a 12-game regular season, the overs are very much in play. But personally, I like that touchdown total a lot more than I like that passing yard total for the exact reason you mentioned, Matt. Even if he plays all 12 regular season games, you look at the second half of the Furman game. If NC State's up 35, 42 points at halftime. Who knows? You never know. But ideally, you'd like to see that kind of a lead going into the second half. I mean, there's a chance they could put Leary on the bench. They put out Ben Finley. They run the ball. They get conservative. You just never know what's going to happen. And I would like to think that NC State's going to have some late game leads in other games where they run the ball more. So the passing yards just seems a little bullish for my blood. I'm with you in that I lean in the under there, but I like the over with the touchdown totals. What do you think, Matt?
Well, you hadn't given the touchdown total yet.
I did. I said 24 and a half. 24 and a half.
I didn't hear you say that.
So he's got to pace at least 2 a game, and he's got to find a way to throw 1 more if he plays all 12.
24 and a half is that's a tricky one. That's the first one that I heard from Vegas where I didn't feel a bit stronger one way or the other. I kind of have him envisioning him in that 20 to 25 range off the top of my head. So I might lean slightly to the under, but that would be a hard bet. And we know Dave Dorn likes to run the football in the red zone. And so that's a hard one. But I might lean slightly toward the under.
Let me say that personally...
Now, this is regular season, right?
All regular season. Everything we're talking about, just regular season. So, when he throws 8 touchdowns in the Orange Bowl, the college football playoff semifinal game, Matt, after they win the ACC championship, then he'll easily get up to 30 touchdowns. But until then, all that matters is what happens in those 12 regular season games. Personally, I don't like any of those numbers. I don't want any part of the action on the passing yards or the passing touchdowns, but we gave our analysis for those who are braver than us and would like to dabble in the passing yards over under totals. But let's move on to an interesting conversation because you might be surprised by what I have to say about this next one, Matt. Zonovan Bam Knight rushing yards over under total is set at 922.5. Could Zonovan Knight become the 11th player in school history to rush for over 1,000 yards in a single season? He currently is the all-time program leader in yards per carry at 5.5, but it's important to remember Zonovan Knight was not the carries leader last year. That was Ricky Person. This is a rotation backfield. If there was college football fantasy, Zonovan Knight's a guy that you might want to put on your fantasy team, but he's also a guy that you'd have to understand he's going to be splitting snaps. If you're watching NC State on Red Zone cheering for your fantasy team, your ACC football fantasy team, he'd probably be a hair-pulling type of guy to have because he's not going to be, he's not a guy that's going to get 25 carries a game. He's not going to get 5-10 targets a game. So, Matt, just your what do you think of that total? Because it's certainly out there juicy for Wolfpack fans thinking that Bam Knight's going to have 1,000 rushing yards this year. But do you lean one way or the other?
I just want real quick on the touchdown passes over and under. Ryan Finley, I think, and Jacoby Brissett are probably the 2 most prominent quarterbacks, right, of the Dave Dorn era and the Dave Dorn offense. And only once did any of those quarterbacks get over on the total. Or 24.5 with the total?
24.5.
Only once, which was Ryan Finley's last year. In the 5 seasons combined as the starting quarterback, did they go over on 24.5. So a little bit of historical perspective. Different offense, obviously. Tim Beck is not Eli Drinkwitz or Matt Canada. So to your question, will Bam Knight go over 1,000 yards? What would the over and under?
922.5.
I got Bam going over 1,000. So I'm going to take it. As you type away on the keyboard.
Sorry, again, for the listeners at home, I don't have my normal microphone. I'm using the microphone on my computer, so I probably don't sound very good, and you probably hear me hacking away at my computer, which those that work alongside me know I am a butcher with my keyboard. I hammer that keyboard.
Typer. Yeah, it's like a typewriter with Justin. He's the old school.
It's like me and Brett Friedlander. Yeah. When I was first on the job, you'd be like, you got to watch out for Brett Friedlander. He's such a loud typer. Well, I'm just like him. And maybe that's why Brett and I get along. I like Mr.
How can you
Avocado
not
Shirt
like
Man.
Brad Friedlander
ACC
and the
legend, man.
avocado shirt?
Hey, that's when you know. That's when you know you're rolling to a special event. When he's got the avocado shirt, you know it's a big day.
Yeah.
Shout out Brett Friedlander. But anyways, Matt, I'm gonna surprise you here, but I kind of like the under for Zonovan Knight, under 922.5 yards. And listen, that's not because I don't trust the guy. I mean,
That's for sure.
as
That's for
Matt will
sure.
tell you, I'm a Bam Knight fan, man.
President of the fan club.
I'm a Bam Knight stan. I listen. I'm not going to try to hide my admiration. He is so fun to watch. He is so talented. I think he's going to be. Whichever NFL team gets him in the draft, and I think he's probably, there's only few running backs that end up getting into those top 2-3 rounds. He's probably going to be a later round guy, but I think whoever ends up getting him is going to get a steal, and I'm certainly going to put him on my fantasy team whenever he goes to the pros. But that said, it's not a lack of ability with Bam Knight. It's just the fact that you look at this rotation and it's going to take a lot of usage for Bam Knight to get to that number. I broke it all down in the article that I have on the Wolfpacker.com. But when you break down that total to a 12-game regular season, if he played all 12 games this fall, which he does have a good track record of, staying healthy and playing in games when he can, he would need to average 14 or more carries per game. And you're probably at home thinking to yourself, that doesn't seem like a lot of carries for a guy with that much talent. And I probably agree with you. But one of the things we've talked about, in these fall camp pressers with some of the players and the coaches is that there's mutual understanding in that running back room between Ricky Person and Zonovan Knight that they are splitting the duties. And, is this a team that's going to run the ball 30, 35 times a game? When you get into some of these games against Clemson and Carolina, you're probably going to have to throw the ball a lot more. It's going to be tough to get to that amount of carries. Do I think Bam's going to end up getting about 50% of the carries? Probably. But look back at his historical stats. Knight has played 24 games at NC State, and only 7 times has he gotten 14 or more carries in a single game. So you're looking at about, less than 30% of the time, Knight's getting 14 or more carries. He has to average that this year. I think he gets close, but when it's all said and done, I don't think he gets to that. And again, that 14 carries number, that's based on his 5.5 yards per carry average over his career. He averaged, I think, 5.6 this past season. He averaged just north of 5.5, maybe slightly lower in 2019. He has been consistent in his yards per carry averages, but it's just a usage thing for me, Matt. And plus, at running back, there's so many unknowns with injuries too. It's an injury-prone position. I mean, it's not out of the question that Knight ends up missing a game or two. I hate to see it. I mean, knock on wood, obviously. But I'm just saying, if I'm looking at this as a better, I'm probably leaning to the under because I think it's a line that Vegas is trying to tempt you and take the over. Am I out of my mind, Matt, or is that a reasonable
Look, those are all very sound explanations. I don't discard any of it. I'm just going on gut feel. I mean, I would point out that in Dave Doran's previous 8 seasons, 3 out of the 8, he has had a 1,000-yard rusher. So historically, it's not out of the question. Most of those guys tend to end up being workhorses, so to speak, feature backs. Matt Days, Naheem Hines, and then Reggie Gillespie in his last year. But he also had some other guys also get pretty close to the mark, or would have gotten the mark. Matt Days would have gotten there in 2015 had he not gotten hurt. So you're right about the hurt angle. That presuming good health is important in the equation, and so there's a lot of logic in your argument. Don't get me wrong. There's a ton of logic in your argument. It's just stunning to hear the logic from somebody who is president of the Bam Knight fan club. Do you want to give listeners where they can sign up and where to mail in to join the fan club, Justin?
Address for the corporate headquarters to be determined, Matt. But on the topic of injuries, just another kind of point here. I mean, maybe you're thinking, the other guy that carries a large part of the load in the rushing attack is Ricky Person, a guy that has struggled with injuries in his career. But even if Ricky Person were to get hurt for whatever reason and he had to miss some time, you look at that running back room at NC State, it's among the best in the ACC, if not the nation, and it's really deep. And even if Ricky Person had to miss some time, Jordan Houston steps right in, and he's probably going to be splitting carries with Bam or Delbert Mims. Even him, he could come in and it wouldn't surprise me to see him get an opportunity to get double-digit carries in a game where one of the main feature backs gets hurt. So to me, there's just too many questions, and I would love to see the over happen. It's a bet that maybe I'd cast, and if it didn't hit, it wouldn't break my heart because at the end of the day, I love to see Bam have success. But that's why I'm on the under. I'm glad that your gut tells you over, and if you want to have fun with the bet, maybe take the over. But if you want to listen to my logic, you agree with me, maybe that under is a number to consider. Last one here. We don't have to expand a whole lot, and I think this is actually kind of newsy relevant here, but Emeka Emezie's receiving yards total this regular season, over under set at 801.5. Now, I'd be interested to see if those odds have changed at all in the past couple weeks. I posted this story on the Wolfpacker.com 2 weeks ago, so late July, but as we've gotten into fall camp, we noticed in our first day at fall camp, there was an open practice session to the media. We noticed Emeka Emezie was not on the practice field for the first session. We later found out earlier this week that he's been sitting out of fall camp, and Dave Doran hopes that he'll be back in about 2 to 3 weeks. He still thinks he's close. Dave Doran didn't sound pessimistic about Emeka Emezie being able to return for the opener, but there is something up to just consider. And, if you're looking at an over-under total for receiving yards, a guy like Emezie, again, there's a lot of great pass-catching options on this NC State roster. And if he did miss any time at all, that 800, plus yard total, that's going to be very much in question. Do you have an initial impression of that total, 801.5 receiving yards, Matt?
Yeah, it seems. Now, look, he had 738 last year, and that includes a slow start. Remember, that was one of the stories early in the season. I think with the Pittsburgh game where he caught the game-winning touchdown. Game 3 was kind of the first time he looked like the number one receiver they thought he would be. So, he probably had he had a full 13 game season and been featured. He probably would have gotten there last year, and it would have been really close. So you understand why Vegas might put it there. But I also look at historically, between 2003 to Calvin Harmon in 2017, NC State didn't have a single receiver reach that total of 801 yards. So that's not just a Dave Doran, that's a 15-year gap. And then you add in only Calvin Harmon and then Jacoby Myers 1 year have broken that 800 yards, but they all went over 1,000, to be fair. When you figure in the fact that this is going to be a good running team, you got to account for there's going to be a little bit of inconsistency probably in Devin Leary's play out there too, right? It's his first full year as a starter if he stays healthy. You can't assume that he's just going to be Devin Leary a Pittsburgh game every single game out. I mean, even in the 3 starts he had, he was great in the Pitt game. Started out real well in the Virginia game and then had a rough second half. And against Duke, kind of started slow and was picking it up and going well, if my memory serves me correctly, before he broke his leg. So you're going to have some ups and downs. That's just to be expected from the quarterback position. You just hope it's more ups than down. I think that's the goal, and that the ups show that cumulatively he's a high caliber starting quarterback in the ACC. But I say that just to say you're right. You got Devin Carter, who now at this point should be on the verge of being a much more consistent pass catcher. You got Thayer Thomas, you got Porter Rooks. hopefully a fully healthy, confident C.J. Riley, who got a lot of praise from Dave Doyle after the first practice. So you have other options. You did lose Kerry Angeline, so maybe Emezie becomes a little bit more popular in the red zone where Angeline was the year before. But that seemed a tad bit aggressive for my liking. So I probably lean slightly toward the under.
Fair enough. This one is probably the most complicated for me because there's so many different factors. Because it's a receiver and receivers rely on quarterbacks. So not only are you looking at Emezie and his injury status and his competition at the position, who else is at his position that could, I guess, quote unquote, steal some of that production if you're looking at it from a gambling sense. But you also have to look at his production when Leary's on the field or off the field. And Emezie was a guy that really benefited when Leary was on the field last year. In my article, I broke down what his production was in the 3 games Leary started last year compared to the remaining 8 games of the regular season. Emezie averaged 80.7 yards per contest and averaged 17.3 yards per catch in games that Leary was the starter. In the 9 games that Leary didn't start, I guess this includes the bowl game, by the way, so not just the regular season, he averaged just 55.1 yards per game, 15 yards per catch. Now, his efficiency last year was by far the best of its career. Emezie did have the best season of his career at NC State last year, but you look at his yards per catch average, he averaged 15.7 yards per reception last fall. That's over 3 yards per catch better than his previous personal high, which was during his freshman season back in 2017, Matt, right?
Yep.
And that was a loaded receiving core, so he was a little bit more of a, kind of an accessory deep ball threat as opposed to, he didn't carry as much of a load in terms of short yard downs type situation. He averaged 12.7 yards per catch that year. That was his second best total. So the question for Emezie is, can he get his reception total up to what it was in 2018 and 2019 when he was a sophomore and junior, while maintaining that production that he had, that efficiency that he had last year with that 15.7 yards per reception? If he does that, he had 53 receptions in 2018. He had 56 receptions in 2019. That was his career best. Last year, that dipped to 47 receptions. But again, he had the most yards of his career at 738 because of that efficiency. Can he get 50 or more receptions this year and maintain that efficiency? If he does, I like his chances. And really, I think the biggest question here is, does Leary stay healthy? Because I think if Leary and Emezie both stay on the field for the entirety of those 12 games, I really like the over because of the connection there. I got a couple stats here that I saw on Twitter earlier, Matt. Emezie is by far Leary's favorite target. And a lot of this receiving core is the same as it was last year. You look at his target distribution, Leary's target distribution on first and second down last season. 22.5% of the time he was targeting Emeka Emezie. That's more than anybody else. Second place was Thayer Thomas at 15%. You look at Leary on third and fourth down. He targeted Emezie 23.3% of the time. Second best, Kerry Angeline, 20%. Now he's gone. Third best, Devin Carter at 16.7%. So, I think Leary's probably going to lean on Emezie even a little bit more because one of his other favorite targets, Kerry Angeline, now out of the picture. We'll see what a Dylan Parham or a Trent Penix can do at the H-back position, filling in for Angeline's role as a receiving tight end. And you also have to consider Thayer Thomas had such an improvement last year. Does he continue that improvement into 2021 statistically, or does he kind of level out into this year and give you more of a consistent model? We'll see, but I kind of lean towards the over here, Matt, although I have questions about it. So last parting shot here, Matt. Of all the things that we discussed today, what are you most confident in? If you had $100, I'm giving you free $100 right here, which I'm not actually, by the way, Matt. But if I did give you free $100 of Monopoly money, what are you wagering it on of these over-unders that we discussed?
Win total.
I'm with you. because at the end of the day, the unders could happen for all of these bets, and I still think NC State could find a way to go to 7-5. So
I just think that you got the 4 games you should win at home, and then you got 8 games to find 3 wins, and quite frankly, there are a lot of them. Louisville at home, Florida State on the road. Wake Forest already had a big injury in their receiving core with Donovan Green going out for the season. That one's on the road. Boston College on the road. They're all winnable games. You just don't bank them, so to speak. So while we focus on the fact that they don't have a lot of banked wins, so to speak, they don't have a lot of banked losses either. So if you just kind of bat average on the other games, you're over on the 6.5. This is why I think Yahoo made it one of the 10 best bets on the over-under win totals in college football this year. So it's hard to, they were picked second in their division, and so if they're that good, it should be over on the 6.5.
I'm in total agreement. I love the over. Of course, because everybody agrees that the over is the play.
That's screwed.
Yeah, I didn't want to finish it, but that's a curse just waiting to happen. But if you're looking at logic, you're looking on paper. Love that over. I'm smashing it. I'm probably taking it personally. But that was a fun conversation, Matt, and we'll have more of them. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us, listeners at home. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always watch our podcast on our YouTube channel, where you should subscribe to our YouTube channel and give this video a thumbs up. Reminders at home, please use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium content, news, and analysis over at thewolfpacker.com. And remember to follow us on social media. You can follow our main account at The Wolfpacker. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will on Twitter. And you can give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and gamble responsibly, Wolfpack fans. Take care.